Aloha everyone, my name is Josh Ko and I'm all the way out here in Hawaii. Been doing the online course for theological writing, and thank you, Professor Jane. The topic that I chose is theological reflection on social internet. And with technology and in the culture that we're in, it's so important that pastors, leaders, parents really come up with a theology of technology, reflecting on the technology before they use. And one of the things that brought me this attention to me is, of course, during the pandemic, I served as interim communications director. We were jumping on all these platforms, streaming and Facebook, and I found myself really thinking about what is the theology behind technology. Another reason why that this kind of like, if you got interest to me, if you didn't hear, in October 28th, 2021, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, held a virtual conference announcing the company's new initiative called the Metaverse. And dun dun dun. And if you don't know anything about the metaverse, he basically said that technology is advancing from desktop to web to phones, from text to phones to video, but this isn't the end of the line. And he introduces this entirely new way of connecting with people in a very immersive way, as if it couldn't get any more immersive. Well, this time you're gonna be like Ready Player One, put on your VR set or Oculus, whatever, and have church in your box on your face. So when this came out, of course, there's already suspicion surrounding Facebook because of all the allegations, especially since Francis Hogan, who was the whistleblower, came out and said that Facebook and these platforms have an agenda. I mean, they put profits before public safety, and and even for, she would also highlight that there are negative effects that happen to our children: depression, young girls, teen suicide has increased because of these social platforms. And so it's in cases like this that really causes, well, I don't know about you, but for me, or even pastors, or even multi-generational kind of like churches, to really consider, hey, like, how do we approach technology? How can church leaders navigate through the current technologies and apply them appropriately for discipleship, or apply them appropriately for the gospel? And here's my thesis, is that as digital media continues to find its way into church practice and everyday life, church leaders must theologically reflect and respond to this wired culture appropriately and apply technologies for the kingdom of God. Now, if you're in any church, people have so many different perspectives on technology. You've got those that are very optimistic. It's those very young people that are like, hey man, technology is the best. It helps us to get the gospel, and pretty much sees no wrong. Very optimistic view. On the flip side, there are those who are pessimistic. And there are those who see technology as the oppressor, breaking up humanity, and social connection. But I pretty much focus this more ambiguous state of seeing technology, saying that technology is more of a tool that can be used. Now, I understand that there are all these different companies and tech giants, but still, the responsibility lies within the hand of the user, the values of the institution that uses the technology. And throughout history, we have seen ministers and pastors and leaders and embrace technologies for kingdom purposes, from oral transmission to scribes to writing, using those technologies, to the Gutenberg press, right, in 1436, and where Johann Gutenberg created the Gutenberg press that created mass information, being able to produce text and send out information. And Martin Luther pretty much said that this was the ultimate gift of God, mainly because he used it, right? He was printing and putting it, and that started the Protestant Reformation, right? So throughout history, we see that, men of God and church leaders have used technology, even radio. It was, who was it? In the radio, there was a pastor that pretty much started radio ministry, Reverend R.R. Brown, pastor evangelist of Omaha Gospel Tabernacle, ushered the first radio church. And he said that pretty much he focused on those who were in rural communities, or those who were sick and could not attend church, and basically wanted to create an experience where they could imagine that they were in church. Television, like, Billy Graham used the technology television to bring the gospel, and many evangelists emerged, pretty much preaching the gospel to hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people. But when approaching this new technology, in which Kevin Healy and Robert Woods kind of like talks about in Ethics and Religious on the social media age, they introduced the new media, which comes with the World Wide Web, and that comes in the 1968. And when the new technology, it separates itself from electronic technology in that there is a more of a social aspect, a social internet. There's interactivity, there's flexibility, there's processing quicker. And even within the past 4 decades, there's just been a boom of digital age and technology. So information became so easily accessed. So in the information age, basically, this new technology, how are we to utilize the social media? Now, just some cautions and concern is that Jean Teenage, professor of psychology, said social networking sites like Facebook promise to connect us to friends, but those who use it, teenagers who use it, actually feel less connected, more alone, more isolated, in the fact that it's shaping their life, creating more of a shallow thinking, in which Nicholas K. Carr kind of raises how it hurts how our brain is developed. Understanding new technology has really impacted culture in that, currently for those of you who are millennials or maybe Gen Xers or baby boomers, basically you were there, you had your values set, and this technology was a tool, basically can be used. But for Generation Z and for Alpha, they are digital natives, and their values are being shaped through the very technology that they use. Information's coming at them at 1,000,000 miles per hour. So even as we approach our young people, and even as we approach different technologies, we recognize that there needs to be some reflection, there needs to be some contemplation on, and theological just reflection on the use of technology. One of the things that I raise is that what do we do with abundance? From the very beginning of time, God told Adam and Eve to not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. With information at our fingertips, with knowledge at our fingertips, we can sometimes see ourselves as all-knowing God, the internet as just Google it, right? And so what do you do when there's so much excess and so much access? And that's where self-control comes into play. And that's where, if we're not careful, the very media and technology that we uses us. And, that's where Dr. Wilder in iGods calls for a pause in the use of technology, reflecting on how a lot of this technology is developing our mind and our brain. So, there's a lot to be said on that, but on the flip side, recognizing that the community and people, this is a new neighborhood. And one of the things that I find is that in a digital age, in a networked religion or networked reality, is that it has created new neighborhoods, and God has called us to love thy neighbor. And one of the things that I find is that in a lot of this, in this computer age, and what we call the ecclesia, the community, is that we can love people. There's no space that God cannot inhabit. He is omnipresent. And so that's one of those things that in my paper we dive into that, about how we can love our neighbor using technology, reflecting on technology, and implementing it within our churches, within our communities, so that we can advance the kingdom of God. So, of course, in conclusion, and all that, there's a lot to be said, but I know there's a lot of information that you're probably can input to this, but basically, with the new advances of technology, the question is can we use the metaverse, right? Can we use the metaverse? Will the church embrace this new technology, the metaverse, or is there a line that's says no, that is completely wrong? I would say for each community, that's for you to wrestle theologically, whether it fits your values, your history, the way that you make decisions, your values, how you implement it. and basically what uses and what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're going to use. So that is my paper. I know I went over my time, but thank you very much, and mahalo and aloha.